I'm excited about the results we can continue to deliver in the months and years ahead for this community, and I'm proud of the way we've done it. I'm proud of the way we've done it. Working across the aisle whenever possible, not trying to tear people down. Not trying to tear people down. Not trying to yell the loudest on cable news, right? That's also how we're going to conduct this campaign. My mom taught me to be respectful. And look, my Republican opponent and I, we live in the same town. We even attend the same church. We just happen to have honest differences of opinion on some very big and important issues. And I've heard his stump speech, and I think he believes what he says. I think that that's what he'd do if he's given the opportunity, and he'll keep the commitments that he's made. And I'm going to make sure that the people of this district know what those commitments are, because many of them are wildly out of the mainstream. The differences between us are very significant. So what I want to do, for example, on the economy, I want to grow the economy from the middle out rather than the top down. I want to have a full restoration of the state and local tax deduction, which has unfairly punished Californians. I want to position our district at the forefront of research and development for biotech and life sciences and clean energy technology. I want to make sure our police and our firefighters have the resources they need, that our soldiers and our sailors and our Marines have everything they need to do the job, to be ready and prepared. And I want to secure our border while treating people with dignity. We can do both. There's no reason we can't do both. Now, you should also know that during the campaign, my opponent has repeatedly said that he wants to, and these are his words, freeze and then cut. Freeze and then cut. Everything other than defense, Social Security, and Medicare. Freeze and then cut. So what does that actually mean? What would he freeze and then cut? Well, here are the following agencies and programs, just a handful, that are part of our discretionary spending each year. Customs and Border Protection and Border Security, he would freeze and then cut. Federal support for fire departments and law enforcement, he would freeze and then cut. Veteran homeless, transition, and suicide prevention programs. Funding for clean beaches, coastal protection, and drinking water. Funding to find a place for the waste at San Onofre. The National Science Foundation, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, National Institutes of Health. Funding for Pell Grants so that kids can afford to go to college. The Children's Health Insurance Program, substance abuse programs, community mental health block grants, help for victims of sexual assault and violence, not to mention funding for all the other community project funding that we've gotten for this district, not to mention the war in Ukraine, the aid to Ukraine. All of it would be frozen and then cut if our opponent gets his way. Does that make sense to any of you? Doesn't make sense to me. And when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, let me just say this. If given the chance, Republican leadership will do all they can to privatize and undermine these essential benefits, these earned benefits that you all have paid into. And we can't let them get away with it. Some senior Republicans have said publicly that if they get into power, they're also going to once again attempt to repeal the Affordable Care Act, along with coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. We can't let them do this. We can't let it happen. And if all that wasn't enough, I think we've got to take very seriously the recent attacks by some Republicans on federal law enforcement. FBI agents, for example, simply doing their job, are now facing death threats and violent attacks. This is unacceptable. And it's a result of the dangerous rhetoric that we're hearing from the former president, and far too many that are following his lead. And many Republicans that have previously claimed to support law enforcement are now on the attack against federal law enforcement, or in the case of my opponent, staying completely silent in not what we have today at all. And it's almost as though you've got the Democratic Party and the anti-Democratic Party. I wish it weren't the case. So the reality is that, like my colleagues, on January 6, 2021, we saw something that I never thought was possible in the United States of America, something that obviously we're all fighting very hard to never see again. I've been tremendously frustrated that we haven't been able to get any voting rights measures across the finish line. And that's not to say we have passed them in the House, just to be very clear. We've passed them repeatedly in the House. It's the Senate that we can't seem to get across the finish line. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one is there isn't a single Republican senator that's willing to stand with us on common sense voting rights measures. And Mitch McConnell, he called it a power grab. Well, it's a power grab by all the people of the country to take their government from, what a concept, right? What a concept. So In Congress, what we have done, I'm proud of, on the House side. What we need to do is get 2 more Democratic senators, and then Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema will not, unilaterally be able to block any reform to the filibuster. And I've advocated publicly and repeatedly for at least a carve-out from the filibuster for voting rights, whether it be for the People Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, or some other form of that. We've got to get there. We've got to get there. Now, I am encouraged to a degree that there is a compromise that's being worked on. I believe it's 9 Republican senators and 7 Democratic senators working on some sort of reform to the Electoral Count Act so that we don't replay what happened on January 6, 2021. And we'll just have to see. And it involves a doubling of penalties for those who would go after election workers. And
be some government intervention between car makers and the government to either defer the cost of that or maybe make some, you've got to have key ignition and your bonus is the push button ignition or something to that effect. But it's happening everywhere.
So I haven't seen, well, I see a lot of people idling, and they're in a parking lot. When I drop my kids off at school, there's a long line of cars and we're all sort of, going slowly to get to the front of the line, drop our kids off. But I haven't exactly seen.
So with all the Googling that I do about it, the Colorado River is down to nothing. And it says that we have actually allocated more than we have to the West Coast, Utah, wherever it's going. But that San Diego apparently has reserved 20 years worth of water. Whether that's true, whether that's not true, and is our answer going to be more funding for desalinization? What is really going to,
I think about this all the time. So I sit on the Water, Oceans, and Wildlife Subcommittee, which we call the WOW Subcommittee. What can I say? But yes, so we can't keep doing what we're used to doing and expect a different thing to happen, right? You just look at the current water levels, whether it's the Colorado River, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, our reservoirs, you name it. And then the other phenomenon that we're seeing is we'll go through these record months of drought or years of drought, right? The last 20 years that is the driest is recorded in the last 1,200 years. And according to UCLA that compiled this data, it was made 73% worse by climate change. So you add that to then seeing atmospheric rivers. So you go from very, very, very dry to all of a sudden a downpour, a deluge, right? And the folks at Scripps Institution are studying all of that. So you add all this new uncertainty, that means it's going to require a lot of change. And the change comes primarily through resilience measures, comes through conservation. We're all going to have to use less. But desal, I'm a big advocate that desal can be done in an environmentally responsible way, and it has to be part of our future. And recycling. Recycling can and will be done all throughout the country. And we've led on it in San Diego County. Also a lot of great stuff going on in Orange County with regard to water recycling. And now we have pure water in Oceanside. And I was very proud that we were just able to get another $10 million in federal funding from the Bureau of Reclamation to go to pure water Oceanside. So this is the future. The good news, well, I don't know if it's 20 years, but the good news is San Diego's been ahead of the curve now for quite some time. And that's why when you see certain other parts of the state where they're worried about having to shut everything off, we need to worry, but maybe not quite as much or not quite as frequently. But over time, we're going to have to worry too. It's just inevitable. And the good news, though, is that I think that desal can be done over time. The economies of scale will mean the costs will come down, the technology will improve, the impact on our marine life and our ocean will continue to diminish. And that is one very exciting opportunity, as is recycling. Thanks for the question. Hi.
Good afternoon. I'm Richard Bain from Carlsbad.
Thank you, Richard.
Question of kind of inflation related.
Yep.
I've actually seen this come up in a lot of news stories in my news feed. Social Security benefits, when are they subject to taxation? Well, apparently from legislation 1983 modified in 1993, some income thresholds were established to where your benefits are going to be taxed at 50% to 50% of your benefits subject to taxation, or 85% of your benefits subject to taxation. But now, in almost 40 years, these thresholds have never been adjusted upward to reflect wage growth and inflation. So more and more people with Social Security benefits that earn income get pushed up into a taxable status.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, don't you think it's time for Congress to adjust these thresholds to reflect all these years of inflation and wage growth and to index them going forward? And would you support legislation for that?
Well, I would love to. I would love to if you could send me more, and we'll make sure that if our team could connect and get your contact info, and if you could send me more of the studies that you're referring to. I think we've got to do all we can to ensure Social Security is actually there for everyone who's paying into it now, and we've got to make sure that it's actually living up to its promise to continue for the 10+ million people who rely on it for their primary source of income, that it continues to be there for them. I'm a lot more concerned with long-term viability when I hear Rick Scott say that, the senator from Florida, for those that don't know, and the head of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, so he's the guy trying to elect Republicans to the U.S. Senate, saying that every 5 years we're going to let it sunset, and then we're going to decide whether or not we want to keep it going, right? And we saw what George W. Bush tried to do after the 2004 election. He went in and he said he had a mandate and he wanted to privatize it. We saw how well that went. So I worry high level about how we're going to keep it solvent and sustainable and continue to provide more benefits, not fewer. And I also reject raising the retirement age, which is what a lot of my friends on the other side of the aisle want to do. So there's a bill that I believe is the right approach called the Social Security 2100 Act. And what it would do is it would restart, how you pay in Social Security, I believe the amount's $147,000 and below, I think is what it is. But then people are because of polarization. What I worry about is people on both sides of the aisle want the issue of immigration rather than actually trying to work on solutions, right? And even things that should be simple, like farm workforce modernization, the visa process, the work permit process, like taking care of dreamers, even that we have a tough time doing. But I'm just going to keep at it. And
or less,
yeah, it's
right?
about 7% of, yeah.
So that having been said, is there, I understand the money that you talked to, what's that, how can we use that money more effectively here?
Simple. Trying to get as much of that money to come to this district and this region as humanly possible so that it actually helps our local water supply. And right now there's another active project that we're working on in Dana Point, South Coast Water District, the Doheny Desalination Project, where we've already gotten them over $20 million for that project. I'd love to see more. I'd love to see our water agencies up and down the coast come to us with ideas, whether it's on desal or recycling, and then we can partner. You don't want me personally engineering the desal plant. I guarantee that. I guarantee that. But when our water agencies, when they come to us, because they all have long-term supply commitments, and that's the thing. If you build one of these plants, you got to make sure you have an offtake agreement. You got to make sure there's enough people willing to take whatever it is you're going to produce at the acre foot it's going to cost to produce it for. And so that's what we need. We need more of our water agencies to see this money and understand, hey, there's a real opportunity here, and to go and decide to build those types of projects. So the next couple of years, I hope we'll see more of them. And just the same with water recycling. I mentioned we just got another $10 million for the Pure Water Ocean side. I'd love to see more in the district in that regard too. Trying to keep those relationships with all of our local water agencies is really important. And if there's a particular, you're here in Carlsbad, you could talk to your local water board folks and say, hey, what are you going to do to further ramp up? Now, Carlsbad gets it. They've been doing this for a very long time. They know it works. Thank you.
449.
Hi, my name is TJ Childs.
Hi.
I'm from Carlsbad.
How are you?
I want to thank you for the $5 million for the barrio lighting.
Oh, you bet.
But
Yeah.
the total project is $7 million.
Yeah.
And Carlsbad has slated $2 million for 2025. So that still means 3 years of darkness. And on my side of the street, I've lived there 20-some years. We don't even have lights.
All right,
Is
we'll
there
remember
any
that,
way you
TJ.
can- Remember, you can push Carlsbad so we can get the funding. We really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
And I want to balance between saying I appreciate it and asking for a little bit more of a push.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So what TJ is referring to, and I should have brought this up, but I'm grateful that you did, is so we're in the Barrio neighborhood. Right down the street here is the Barrio neighborhood in Carlsbad. It's the oldest residential neighborhood in Carlsbad. And you all know Carlsbad, where you've got all these beautiful planned communities, new housing developments, and the developers, through exactions, often build the surrounding infrastructure, your street lights, your nice traffic circles, or your traffic four-way stops and things like that. Well, the Barrio neighborhood has not had those same opportunities because you haven't had the private development, you haven't had those developers needing to pay exactions, so it's been left behind, you know, decade after decade. And you go down there, and there's a great deal of pride of ownership in the houses themselves, but if you look at the, you know, the intersections, the sidewalks, the traffic lights or non-existent traffic lights, utility poles that are all above ground, there's a lot of work that needs to happen. And so what we did through the community project financing process, which every year we get an opportunity through the appropriations, House appropriations, to work with our cities, work with local agencies to fund priority projects. And we go to them. We go to, so, you know, also thank Matt Hall and Priya Bhat Patel and Teresa Costa and Peter Norby and your council, because they told us, along with the city manager, hey, we need money for this, for the Barrio neighborhood. And so they prioritized it, they worked with us on it, and we were able to deliver the $5 million. And that'll go a long way. I think they're going to do 8 traffic circles, they're going to do street lights and the whole thing. But as you correctly said, there's more that needs to be done. So I would just encourage you, keep on telling them, keep showing up. And I think it's Peter's district, Peter Norby's district. So keep letting Peter know, hey, you got a couple more traffic signals and street lights or overhead traffic lights that we need help with. Next year, for fiscal year 2023, they asked for money towards the Veterans Memorial Park, which is on the other side of the golf course, and is going to be amazing. I don't know if you all have seen the plans for that Veterans Memorial Park, but it's going to be great. It's going to be great. And so that's a $3 million grant that we're hopefully going to get for next fiscal year. So stay tuned on that. But the other thing, utility undergrounding, we can hopefully help with that. There's a pot in the bipartisan infrastructure law for utility undergrounding. We're working with Dana Point, some other cities, because throughout our district, there are pockets of the district where everything's overhead. And little by little, I'm not saying we can do everything all at once, because it's a competitive process and it's a multi-year process, but we can begin neighborhood by neighborhood to try to address some of those needs as well. And for me, that's like the most fun stuff, because we actually see the result of what we did. Thank you.
445.
Hi, Steve Spear, Carlsbad, and
Hi,
a
Steve.
75-year-old native of San Diego.
All right.
I want to get back to a comment you made in your opening remarks on the state and local
Oh,
taxes.
salt. Yep.
I'm speaking out of enlightened self-interest.
Yep.
Because when that bill passed under the previous people,
Yeah.
it's now costing me $4,000 a year more
Yeah.
in my income taxes. And I wonder, what is the status of putting this back, raising the limit?
Amen. So, and so many people across our district, this is the most important to them. And it's hurt their bottom line tremendously. It's hurt my my wife and I. And all around this district, I hear, what are you doing? So here's what we're doing. We passed twice in the House of Representatives legislation. The first time to eliminate the cap altogether. So just to put it in historical perspective, since the Revenue Act of 1913, you've been able to fully deduct your state and local taxes from your federal tax bill. That's been the basic bargain of the federal tax system. And then in 2017, 104 years went by. Then 2017, then President Trump and the Republicans in the House at the time, their first bill was the Trump tax cuts, where 83% went to the top 1% of taxpayers, very, very wealthy. And in that was a $10,000 a year cap on salt on the state and local tax deduction. Now what that means basically is if you own a home in this district, you're going to hit the cap. About 62% of this district owns a home. The average price of a home in this district is now north of $1 million. If your property tax is 1%, guess what? They're supposed to repeal it. They take more than they give. Unfortunately, West Virginia is one of those. So I'm not afraid to stand up to our administration or anybody on this. We got to do what's right down there. When I asked them what's actually happening with these drugs, how are these drugs getting here? And what I heard this most recent time was they're relying on the cartels in Jalisco and in Culiacan, Sinaloa. And I know the history of that area a bit because my grandfather, my mom's dad, is actually, he's long since passed away, but he was from Culiacan. Again, many decades ago. But what they're doing is they have children as young as 12 years old, and they're putting this stuff in their bags as they cross every day to and from, and they're saying, hey, you don't even have to look at what's in there. But when you cross, you know, you'll have somebody that will take your bag, and then you'll get an Xbox, right? Or they'll have 5 trucks that go through. They have 5 different drivers, all of whom have drugs that they're taking, and they know full well that CBP will probably be able to capture 1 of them or 2 of them, but not all 5 of them. They don't tell the drivers this, by the way. They all, you know, the drivers have no idea this is happening. So CBP will capture 1 or 2 of them, but the other 3 will get through. And then the other thing that I just heard that they're doing is they will take a amount of drugs and they will put it in a magnetic box, and they will stick that box to a car with a GPS. Of course, the driver's completely unwitting that this is happening. And then that person will drive the stuff across the border. They have the GPS tracking, they take it, and the driver doesn't even know. So we continue to watch as they try to outsmart us, but it's not right to say one side cares and the other side doesn't, because it's just not how it is. I care very deeply that we actually deal with the challenges that exist, which is why we're investing a lot more money at San Ysidro. It's also why we're doing Otay Mesa 2. We just got, I don't know if it's been announced yet, but significant federal funding for that. That'll hopefully free up people at San Ysidro to actually focus on their core competency and deal with folks coming through the ports of entry. 328 ports of entry along the southern border. The issue is those ports, not necessarily areas between the ports, but those ports need more personnel, more scanners, more technology. That's what we're committed to doing, and actually addressing the problems. Then the other thing on the legislative side,
More money is the problem, but not addressing
disagree.
Paul's work.
Disagree.
Go back to watching Fox News.
Wait a minute. No. We can. All right, George, there's also the Fentanyl Sanctions Act, the Fentanyl Results Act, making fentanyl Schedule 1. I voted for that many times. Happy to talk more. Give Colby your info, or Colby can give you his info. Thanks. Thanks, George.
Mike, I now get to ask you a question.
I thought you were going to ask me. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Are you going to ask me a question? You can.
Well, no. Well, I am, but I'm asking it on behalf of a constituent who sent her question in, and she's watching today, so I want to make sure we get this in for you as well.
Thank you.
Her name is Betsy Shapiro. I don't know the community that she's in, but I'm going to read her question word for word, so
Okay.
I'm not going to try to paraphrase. Dear Representative Levin, I know you care and take action for gun violence prevention. Please, something must be done about social media not flagging and reporting this kind of rhetoric. We know time and time again these young mass murderers write what they will do. They want notoriety, and no one usually stops them. Go on. People are being killed physically and emotionally. They will be used this way. Please help to ban them. The ban worked for 10 years, and hopefully it is not too late. So many have these weapons of war, and they are already in wrong hands. Thank you for getting back to me. Betsy Shapiro, she's an art therapist and volunteer for Survivors Empowered.
Well, thank you, Betsy. If you're watching, thank you, Betsy. I hope she's watching. But a lot to unpack there. In terms of social media, I think we all know social media is sort of out of control right now. Not sort of. And there are a lot of different pieces of legislation that are looking at Section 230 under the 1996 Communications Law that would hopefully begin to address some of the more dangerous things that we're seeing on social media. But with regard to gun violence writ large, let me just spend a minute and talk about that. I was very proud that a couple months ago we passed for the first time in 30 plus years a major piece of bipartisan legislation, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Wasn't as bipartisan as I would like, by the way, but we were able to get this major bill on gun violence prevention. First one since 1994. And it doesn't do nearly enough, but it does make it more difficult to buy a firearm if you're under 21. And it also, to a certain degree, closes what's known as the boyfriend loophole. Not all the way, not as it really should be, but it makes it a lot more difficult in instances of domestic violence if you're convicted of a domestic violence offense to go and purchase a firearm. Now, what I have advocated for, what I will advocate for, what I would like to see ASAP, we passed the assault weapons ban in the House. We passed it for the first time in a long time. And the Senate now needs to act on it, right? That's another one where if I had $1 for every time the Senate doesn't do anything. And we don't need more weapons of war. right? But that assault weapons ban also isn't going to take away people's guns. I think that's the other thing that is out there that is misinformation. The other thing is universal background checks. We need universal background checks. It's long past time. It shouldn't be easier to go and buy a gun than it is to go to Walgreens and get Sudafed. This is ridiculous. When is this going to stop? So all I would say is there is a huge difference between me and my opponent, between what House Democrats have done and what House Republicans would do if given the opportunity. And as far as the assault weapons ban, we know from 1994 to 2004 that the rate of violent crime and gun-related deaths plummeted as a result of that policy. We've got to keep at it. We've just got to keep at it. It's just tragic what's going on. Local public schools. I went to the neighboring district. I went to Saddleback Valley Unified Schools. They go to Capistrano Unified Schools. When I was a student in the 80s, and if you were a student in public schools around that time, remember how we had earthquake drills, right? Now they have active shooter drills. This is real. This is ridiculous that our kids have to deal with this, that our teachers have to deal with this. And so we're just going to keep at it. But I'm obviously very, very grateful for so many people in this community, because without you, it would not have been possible to pass even what we've already passed.
And now, Mike, we're going to do something we've never done before.
Ooh.
We've gotten through all the tickets.
Wow.
And I know, and we still have 20 minutes. Oh, we haven't. Oh,
Never
I thought
mind.
we had. Oh, never mind.
We did not. Necessity is the mother of invention. Yeah. 453.
There's got to be more tickets. Come on.
And 462.
There you go.
So, hi, my name is Per Kjellgren. As you can hear, I was not born in this country. I'm a new citizen. I've been living here for 24 years, not in California, only here for 2 years, but before then in Connecticut.
Oh, good move.
My wife thinks so. She was here as an exchange student in 1970.
Good. Welcome, welcome. That's great.
So my question is, I will bring up something that could be a little bit controversial, and it's a student loan forgiveness.
Yep.
I grew up in Sweden. We took student loans. We were repaying them over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I think you are working on something in Congress about this. I think I read something about that. But why do we forgive loans? Why don't we change them to be 30 years loans with a 1% interest rate?
Great question. So is that what it is in Sweden, 1%?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 1 or 2% at that time.
Well, I dug into the student loan interest rate a while ago with several colleagues, and you know, there's no reason that we set the interest rate as high as it is, and it's my position that the interest rate on a federal student loan, no reason why it can't be zero. The idea is to send people off to college, right? Get them that education to be zero. So I co-sponsored a bill. I think there's like 15 of us on the bill that would set the federal student loan interest rate to zero, and would also forgive the interest, right? And what I worry about, so I worry about a few things. There are parts of what the executive order did that I like, and parts that I think could have been done differently. What I like is that 90% of the help is going to people who make less than $75,000 a year. That's a good thing. Pell Grant recipients getting $20,000 as opposed to 10, that means that 90% of the money goes to people making $75,000 a year or less. That's good. The challenge, I think, is that it solves a symptom but not the problem. The problem is that higher education is out of control, the cost of higher education. It used to be in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 70s. The Pell Grant was designed to actually cover the cost of college education. What a crazy idea, right? And it doesn't even come close anymore. And so I've advocated for, if nothing else, doubling the Pell Grant, setting the federal student interest loan rate at zero. That would be a great start. Now, I worry also about you know, what all of this is going to cost. I'm one of those Democrats. I am a Democrat who cares about what stuff costs. We exist. We're out there. I'd like to think there's a lot more of us than you know, you might know. And what I am concerned with, and what I think will happen, what I'm hopeful will happen, is people are going to start paying those loans back. right? And when loan payments restart, that will have a deflationary impact that will offset whatever inflationary impact there is as a result of the forgiveness. The last thing I'll say is one of the big features of the executive order that hasn't been reported on as much is that the income-based loan repayment is now for 5% of income as opposed to 10% of income, and you don't accumulate interest on the income-based loan repayment. What we have now is people who are paying a little bit each month, and all of a sudden their interest is more than the principal, right? And that's how we got into this $1.7 trillion mess that we're in right now. Now, here's the problem. The other side of the aisle, again, they say, well, we don't like this executive order, this is a giveaway, and I've heard all of it, right? Okay, well, let's come to the table in a bipartisan way and work on the cost of higher education. And that's where we need to go next. And that's where we're going to try to go. You know, and I hope that I can be a big part of that. Thank you for the question.
455 and
1%.
452.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Mike. I'm Matt Duclas from Carlsbad.
Great.
You did talk about the first question that I had was about fighting for gun safety.
Good.
And so please keep fighting for that. I have kids that are 13 and 14,
Yeah.
and they've gone through all those drills that you talked about, and they're definitely scared to go to school in some cases because of that. But the question I have now is on, this is something that's timely with the heat wave that's been going on. All that extra power that we need to generate is mostly coming from natural gas plants now. And I actually wanted to keep the nuclear plant going, but my question is, where's all that extra power going to come from?
Right.
And how can we get that sort of off of natural gas?
Right.
Right. So what different investments will be made here to help that out?
Well, it's a fantastic question. The problem is it can't happen fast enough, right? And as a recovering environmental lawyer, I know that building stuff in California is really tricky. Yep. And the reality is we've got to build tens of gigawatts of renewable generation, solar, offshore wind, battery storage systems. We've got to do it incredibly fast. And at the same time, we've got to dramatically modernize the grid to keep up with all this new renewable electricity that we're going to put on the grid. And the challenge, of course, is we want to go electric with transportation. We want to go electric with home heating and all the rest of it. That takes a lot of juice, and we've got to get from here to there. We can do it if we are willing to accelerate the speed with which it takes to deploy one of these large-scale solar, wind, battery storage projects. But we've got to, recognize that the permitting gets in the way of a lot of that. Now, I don't support what Joe Manchin wants, is to accelerate permitting for oil and gas and thinking that that's the solution, or misusing our public lands to just double down on more oil and gas production, things like that. So this is a delicate balance, and we're just going to work very hard to see whatever we can do. And also residential, community solar, residential solar, making sure net metering continues, things like that. All of it's really important, and we all have a role to play. And then, of course, conservation is going to be important, too. I was with everybody. I was at a house party the other day. We've done, I think, 253 house parties, and we're all out there, and everybody got their phone beeping and buzzing all at the same time. We thought, uh-oh, it's an Amber Alert. What is happening? But it was Flex Alert, right? Now, fortunately, the house we were at, the air conditioning was not on. Unfortunately, it had broken. But
Was like Monday, 4 p.m.
Something like that, yeah, something like that. So, from a systems and a high-level analysis perspective, I trust our friends at the California Independent System Operator to tell us exactly what we need to get from here to there, how much longer we need to keep certain fossil assets running, how much longer you need Diablo or other assets running, and then how quickly you can transition from here to there. But whatever I can do, and I hope the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, really helps to make a lot of these projects pencil for a lot of people. Right now, you can put solar on your roof with the IRA 30% tax credit, and either you can finance it, or if you have the money, you're looking at a 3-4 year payback in most cases. Battery storage system, pretty good payback. as well. So now we're talking, right? These are starting to be very easy things to do. Well, I shouldn't say easy for everybody. Got to make it easier for everybody. How about for them to put solar on their roof or electric vehicles in their garage? The other thing is trying to make electric vehicles that don't cost 80 grand. That's important too. So I was encouraged to see GM, Chevy yesterday announced the new Equinox EV, 30,000. That's great. It's a great place to start. Hopefully that includes wheels and stuff. Anyway, it's not going to happen overnight, right? But it's got to happen. It's got to happen. We've got to wean ourselves over time off fossil energy. And kind of an interesting wrinkle in all this is if you look at the next several weeks, you will see a lot of television ads against us. And I'd encourage you, look at the fine print, see who's funding those ads. Congressional Leadership Fund, right? You all can remember that. Go online and look at who they are. Go to Open Secrets, Koch Industries, Chevron, Exxon. Guess what? They don't like that I go after them, that I want to transition away from fossil energy. But I'm going to keep at it because it's the right thing to do. Meanwhile, we take no corporate PAC money at all. I'm one of about 40 members of Congress that don't take any corporate PAC money. So there you go. That's a campaign finance reform, a whole nother conversation for another day. But appreciate the question. How are you?
Okay. Thanks for not taking the PAC money, by the way. I appreciate that. I'm Julia Ajdura from Carlsbad, and in fact, I live in the neighborhood, so I walked here to this town hall.
I love it.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Some other neighbors too. But so, the federal funding you got for the barrio lighting and traffic safety is very appreciated, very much.
Thank you.
My question is, if federal funds are diverted or spent on purposes other than the stated intent on this or any other local in our congressional office for that, and I've got my pen out if it's someone other than you yourself.
Well, it would, yeah, I mean, for purposes of that, you can just, so Eric doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I would say Eric over there, because he's our only guy from our official staff who's here today. But you can pester him, but we're going to make sure that money gets spent here, and your city's going to make sure of it too. You bet. You bet. Hopefully this is a pretty simple one. They got traffic circles and streetlights. I think they can figure it out. That's my hope. If not, we're in real trouble. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm Lauren Altman from Encinitas.
All right.
Yay.
Distant, far off Encinitas. Yay.
Took about 10 minutes to get here. So my question is not local, more federal, and it relates to, funny, we're in a senior center, seniors.
Yeah.
I work in the Medicare industry, Medicare health industry. I'm an independent agent, insurance agent. And so obviously my clients are mostly all seniors, people on Medicare. And so there are commercials on TV that are about to come up. I don't know if this is in your purview or not, but it definitely relates to CMS and Medicare and all the regulations that we have as insurance agents, and yet third-party marketers are out there like Joe Namath commercials. And then my clients constantly are asking me, Lauren, can you stop these phone calls that they get barraged with, constantly from these third-party marketers? Yet an insurance agent like me, just so all of you know, we're not allowed to cold call. We're not allowed to just walk up and knock on your door. There are so many restrictions on us, and now we're actually being coupled in, with the third-party marketers. And there's a new rule that says that we have to record all of our phone calls now with anybody we discuss Medicare Advantage or prescription drug plans with. And when you have clients that you've had for years, you talk about their families, their drugs, their health, their travel, a lot of private information.
Sure.
And so we've gotten together and signed petitions, and this is all supposed to start October 1st. And how does everybody feel about that? And I know we're trying to get Congress, I guess, to stop that, or at least get us out of that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I would suggest, again, not to pick on Eric, but if you could exchange contact info, and we'll make sure that we follow up. I don't know. I see those Joe Namath ads. I don't think I'd trust Joe Namath with my health care. I don't think I'd trust Tom Selleck to give me a reverse mortgage. Like, I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing that's bad. But be happy to follow up. Absolutely.
Last two, 448 and 456.
Awesome. Step on up. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very
Watch
much,
out,
Mr.
she's tough.
Congressman.
Should take
my
that
name
mic.
is Krishna Epasani. I live in Carlsbad.
Great.
And I would like to congratulate you on working on the clean energy as well as the other parts, the technologies.
Thank you.
And my question here for you is, would it be possible for you to get federal funding to develop Carlsbad as the mini science hub for the North County area?
For the what now?
Science museums and science park
Oh,
and things.
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the good news, and what was your name again?
My name is Dr. Krishna Epasani.
Dr. Krishna,
Before coming to
wonderful.
Carlsbad, I was in Boston, Massachusetts.
Got it.
For 35 years.
The good news,
Yeah.
Dr. Krishna, is that a lot of the biotech and life sciences companies want to come to Carlsbad. And I personally see the weather here and I see the weather in Boston. I think that's a pretty easy, that's a pretty easy one. I was talking to Thermo Fisher,
Yes.
and they just opened a big new facility in Boston. I said, what are you guys doing? Come on, it's like perfect here. But I think that, the good news is that Carlsbad is already front and center in a lot of this. Anything that we can do to support. So, every year trying to increase federal funding that directly goes to the R&D that help a lot of our local companies. The other is the CHIPS and Science Bill. I think the CHIPS and Science Bill will be a huge win for Carlsbad. And if they're not, fabricating microchips, it's the businesses that help surround or rely on a more robust domestic manufacturing of semiconductors and microchips. So I'm really encouraged and excited, but if there's anything we can do at a federal level, I'm happy to look into it as some sort of, the cities are usually responsible for designations and things like that.
Is it possible to set up something like a science museum for the kids to be?
I love it. Yeah, I'm all for it. I would be happy to partner with the city on that, but ultimately it would be a municipal or a private project to set up a science museum, something like that.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks.
Okay, one last time for me.
All right.
We have our last question coming up, and before the last question, since I think you'll all probably be ready to get home and continue on with your day, you'll notice that in your seats there were comment cards, and if you could please fill those out on your way out. There will be people back there to collect the cards from you. We can't make these better if we don't have your feedback, and I really do go through and read all of the cards and take into consideration all of your feedback. So it's much appreciated and helps us make this a better experience for all of the communities. I also wanted to thank you all for helping us be so respectful to the celebration of life that was across the hall today. It created an interesting circumstance as far as getting everything sorted out and organized in the lines, and I did want to thank you for your consideration and all of your effort to make this very smooth here and across the hall for those people. And now, Mike, I'm passing it back to Kathy, and here's your last question.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, Mike. My name is Joe Zamet, and I live here in Carlsbad. My wife and I are here today.
Terrific. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
I'm not here asking for anything. What I would like to know is, first of all, congratulations to you and your cohorts for a very good summer.
Thank you.
In terms of bills you'll be able to pass and initiatives you push through.
Thank you.
Up to Joe Biden. My question is, when you have these wins, you see these little peaks like this in terms of the news and what have you, what happens, and even Joe Biden is becoming more, I'll say, aggressive in his comments these days. But generally speaking, in your opinion, how do you grab the narrative from individuals who have nothing to offer, are more famous for their crimes and misdemeanors, but seem to capture the lion's share of the news?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think about this all the time, and I made a decision when I got to Washington, D.C. that I'd rather make policy than make a point, right? I'd rather get stuff done than wind up screaming on TV. And so we made a decision very early that a lot of the footprint of what we wanted to accomplish in terms of earned media, in terms of getting coverage, was local. You know, I would far rather have the Union Tribune write a really cool story about how we got sand on the beach, as opposed to, you know, going on MSNBC to scream about whatever Marjorie Taylor Greene just tweeted. Personally, I think you didn't elect me to go on MSNBC to scream about. Well, there you go. So I think also, unfortunately, the discourse, the rhetoric, the toxicity, and then the media latching on, it's bad for the country. It reinforces polarization. Ezra Klein, a really bright guy, he has a great book called Why We're Polarized, and it's this feedback loop where the public expects that polarization because they see it on TV. The elected officials see it on TV, they hear it from their constituents, they expect it. I hope always will be the case that you would rather that I actually am out there working every day trying to advocate to bring resources home, trying to work across the aisle, whether it be on veterans, whether it be on environmental issues, whatever else. Of course, standing up for the values that I have. That's a given. But ultimately focusing on bringing people together to deliver results for the community. I hope that's what everybody expects. And I hope that's across the country what more and more people will expect of their elected officials, precisely at a time when if you just watch MSNBC or Fox, you're only getting part of the story. You're only getting part of the story. So all I know to do is not to concern myself too much with what that national narrative is. Now, of course, I pay attention like everybody else, but I think when you start, tweeting back at the Marjorie Greenes, you're not gonna get anywhere, right? You're not gonna get anywhere with that. So, no, exactly. But some of my colleagues do that, and it might increase their Twitter followership too. But I'm not there for how many Twitter followers I've got. Right? I'd much rather be focused on the number of bills I've gotten signed into law and the number of dollars we've been able to deliver for the district as opposed to the number of Twitter followers that I have. Right? So I think that every member of Congress handles the job differently, but for me, that's sort of my North Star, is are you getting anything done? Right? Now, hopefully you've liked what you've heard. Hopefully you want to help us continue to move the district in a positive direction. We really, really need your help. If you're able to help, we've got 59 days to go, 30 days until the ballots drop, 30 days until you get your ballots. We have an office right down the street, 10 minutes away, Palomar Airport Road, El Camino Real. We're there 7 days a week. You can talk to people, you can make calls, you can contact voters, or you don't have to talk to anybody. You can stuff envelopes if you choose, but we would love your help. And if you're able to give a bit of your time, this is our democracy. It's only as strong as we all make it. And I need your help in the months ahead and in the years ahead. So with that, thank you so much to our whole team. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everybody.